Welcome back to World History. We are now starting World War I. Of course, they didn't call it that then. They simply called it the Great War or the War to End All Wars, but we'll get into that a bit more later. We're at Roman numeral II, the pressing conflict. Letter A, the commencement of war. Remember, on June 28th, 1914, Austrian Archduke Francis Ferdinand was assassinated. Serbia refused to give in to Austria's demand, and the two are going to war. Well, Russia began to mobilize its troops to protect Serbia's independence. When Germany ordered Russia to stop, and it didn't, Germany declared war on Russia on August 1st. When France refused to identify itself as neutral, Germany declared war on France as well. The alliance system had successfully drawn most of Europe into this war. In this war, the two sides involved will be the Central Powers and the Allies. Now, please don't be confused between World War I and World War II. In World War II, it's Allies and Axis powers, but World War I, it's the Allies and Central Powers. Central Powers, at the beginning of the war, the two sides, or the two countries involved were Germany and Austria-Hungary. So make sure you know that. Germany and Austria-Hungary. For the Allies at the beginning of the war, it included Serbia, Russia, and France at the beginning of the war. More countries will join the war, as you can see from the map below, but that's all you need to know for the moment. Both sides greeted the war with joy, but neither side was ready for it. People cheered and threw flowers at the soldiers heading off to war. Thousands of men rushed to enlist in the army, eager to win glory on the field of battle. Both sides expected a few short campaigns, like the ones in the 1860s and 70s. Yet not everyone favored the commencement of the war. Sir Edward Grey said, "The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime." The progress of the 19th century was about to end on the battlefield of the 20th century. Question might be asked, is war wrong? Or is war always wrong? Probably the best answer to give is not in self-defense or to deliver the oppressed. That's just my personal opinion. Maybe you have a different opinion. That's perfectly fine for you. So let's talk about this war. Number one, war in the West. Germany found itself in a tight spot. France was to the west, Russia was to the east, but Germany had already planned for this. It was called the Schlieffen Plan. If you look at page 444, it shows you a close-up view of the Schlieffen Plan, or at least of the Western campaign part of the Schlieffen Plan, 444. This was what the plan did. It was the German plan to attack and defeat France first, and then fight Russia. They believed that since Russia was bigger, it would take longer to mobilize its troops. In the meantime, the Germans would cross into neutral Belgium and then march into Paris within a few weeks, forcing France's surrender. The army would then march on Russia and defeat them as well. So attack France first through Belgium, and then attack Russia later. Well, that seemed to be going perfectly fine until it didn't. When Belgium was invaded, Britain joined the Allies. Belgium refused Germany's request to use its land, so Germany marched in anyway. Britain, angered by the broken Treaty of Belgian neutrality, declared war on Germany and joined the Allies. Meanwhile, Germany continued to push toward Paris. The Battle of the Marne, we're not going to talk about too many battles in this war, but we're going to mention a few key ones, so make sure you know what each one of these battles did. Within a month, German forces were just outside Paris. Reinforcements of soldiers came from Paris taxicabs. General Foch, the leader of French forces, helped stop the German advance on Paris. Foch is famous for the message that he sent: "My right gives way, my center yields, situation excellent, I shall attack." At the Battle of the Marne, French forces stopped the German advance, and that's worth noting. Trench warfare became the new style of warfare in World War I. By the end of 1914, a long line stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland covered northern France. Both sides built long lines of trenches to prevent either side from going on the offensive. Number 2, war in the East. When we say the East, we're talking about Eastern Europe. The Russians had mobilized faster than Germany had expected and won some early victories. General Paul von Hindenburg was the commander of German forces who beat the Russian army back. That's what you need to know about him. Why was Russia struggling? Well, Russia was in a weak position. The inadequacy of Russian factories to produce the needed supplies fatally weakened the Russian war effort, and supplies into the country were limited because of the German blockades and because of Russia's frozen ports. So Russia was in a weak position. They couldn't produce their weapons fast enough, and they couldn't get the weapons from their allies because of blockades and because of frozen ports most of the winter. Also, Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire will join the Central Powers. Bulgaria joined in order to take over Serbia. The Ottomans joined because of their hatred for Russia. The Battle of Gallipoli was an important battle in the East. It was a battle which the British sought to aid Russia by taking the Gallipoli Peninsula, which was controlled by the Ottomans. If you look at page 448, it shows you a map of the war in Europe. You can see where Gallipoli is located. You can also see it on this map here. The Gallipoli Peninsula is right here. So the British were trying to take the Gallipoli Peninsula. By doing so, it would cut off the Ottomans, and they would be able to support the Russians with their war material. A twofold thing that would hopefully help in the war effort. Unfortunately for the Allies, poor planning and strong Ottoman resistance doomed the invasion, and the British were forced to withdraw. So at the Battle of Gallipoli, which, as I just described, was an attempt by the Allies to take over a part of Turkey and free up Russia, it failed. It failed in its efforts. A little bit more information about the wars going on during this time period. The Ottoman Empire. At the start of the war, the Ottoman Empire, as we remember, was known as the sick man of Europe because it was in decline. In fact, it controlled no land west of Turkey. Young Turkish leaders saw the war as an opportunity to restore power and territory to the empire. Anyone ever heard of Lawrence of Arabia? It's an old movie, but it's also based on history. Arabs in the Middle East revolted against the Turks during the war, and the British sent a small band of officers led by Colonel T.E. Lawrence to help them. Lawrence, who spoke Arabic and lived like an Arab, led the rebels in attacking the Turkish rail and communication links. He was so effective that the Turks offered rewards for his capture, dead or alive. Lawrence was captured and tortured, but he escaped to write about his adventures. Movies were even made about him. He has gone down in history as Lawrence of Arabia. Letter B. The course of the war. During most of the war in the West, the situation was a stalemate. Definition of a stalemate is, it is a situation in which both sides are at a standstill. Neither side could break through the trenches set up by the other. During each year of the war, both sides conducted major offenses that cost thousands of lives but produced few gains. For example, in the winter of 1915, the high commands of both sides made plans that they thought would turn the tide of the war in their favor during the following year. The Germans hoped to capture the French fortress at Verdun, and the Allies planned an offensive on the River Somme. In February 1916, the Germans launched a massive bombardment on the highly fortified but lightly manned French fortress at Verdun. When the shelling finally stopped and the Germans sent troops to take the French positions, the once forested countryside was pitted with craters and resembled the moon's surface. In an effort to stop the Germans, the French poured more troops into Verdun. They pushed the Germans back, but the cost in lives was horrendous. Each side lost more than 336,000 men, resulting in a total of more than 698,000 battlefield deaths. At the same time that the Germans committed reinforcements to hold the French at Verdun, the combined Allied attack on the Somme began with a prolonged bombardment that was meant to eliminate the first line of German troops. When the bombardment stopped, the Allied troops crossed No Man's Land. No Man's Land was the area between the two trenches that no man wanted to go to live. During the bombardment, German machine gunners crouched in relative safety. As soon as it stopped, they scrambled back to their guns and made huge gaps in the advancing line of Allied troops. Only one group of British soldiers reached their objective. Their leader had made them cross No Man's Land during the bombardment. On the first day of the battle, nearly 60,000 British soldiers were killed. The battle raged for months, during which time British lost about 4,000 young men every day. The British made one desperate attempt to break the German line using a new weapon, the armored tank, but they made little difference in the outcome of the battle. Other tanks were used during World War I, but they went only 3 miles per hour and were too cumbersome to aid in the fighting. The Battle of the Somme cost 420,000 British, 204,000 French, and 465,000 German casualties. The other major campaigns of 1916 were similar battles of attrition. Speaking of which, war of attrition. Definition of this is style of war in which one side tries to gradually wear the other down. Number 1. Italy joins the Allies. Although Italy had been a part of the Triple Alliance at the beginning of the war, Italy declared neutrality because Germany and Austria-Hungary were conducting offensive, not defensive wars. So, by default, I guess Italy was able to break off its alliance with its former buddies. Italy began negotiating with the Allies, and after receiving certain promises, declared war on the Central Powers in 1915. While Italy's involvement will be minor, it opened up another front that Germany and Austria had to defend. Number 2, new weapons of war. World War I experienced huge numbers of casualties, mostly because of the new weapons being used. Machine guns, grenades, flamethrowers, mustard gas. Rather than having to load after every bullet or every few bullets, a single soldier could fire hundreds of bullets in a minute. Grenades replaced accuracy with approximation. Soldiers could be killed by mustard gas before they even realized what was happening. Near the end of the war, Germans began using guns that lobbed shells over 75 miles. Also, the tank. The British tank appeared in combat in 1916, but because it was slow and hard to control, it little affected the war effort. Planes and zeppelins were used for the first time. For the first time, men took to the air to fight their wars. German zeppelins, similar to modern blimps, raided and bombed British cities. In your books on page 446, I want you to read the orange box entitled The Red Baron. Read that to yourself. Once you have finished, please unpause the video and we'll continue. Submarines. For the first time, men took the war underwater as German submarines attacked both Allied and neutral ships without warning. On page 447, please read about German U-boats in that box. Once you have finished, please unpause and we will continue. That's all the material that we're going to cover for today. For your homework, I want you to do pages 185 and 186 and 187 and 188 in your activities book. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Be good, do good.